Black Brits will never unite. But what if they did? Imagine if every Black Brit in the UK decided to move as one and bought up an entire town. Here's what would happen in the first 6 months. And stick around to the end, because what Parliament does changes everything. Month 1. Day 1, they move in. Singles, friends, couples, siblings. Every single one of them bought their property. That's 25 million people moving to one town. And decisions need to be made fast. So within a few weeks, a community assembly is called. Not by the council, by them. And they elect a group of people to make decisions on their behalf. And soon after, every single resident registers to vote, because quietly they know what's coming. And they file an application that will change everything. But we'll get back to that. Month 2. The business is open. Plumbers first, electricians, carpenters, the trades that hold everything together. Then food, the authentic Jamaican restaurant, Somali, Nigerian, market stalls with fabrics, Afro-Caribbean, fruit and veg galore, mate. Then professional services, accountants, solicitors, tutors. An internal investment pool is started. Every resident puts in what they can. No minimum, no maximum. That pool funds the next business and the next. Right now, the pound circulates for 6 hours in the Black community. In this town, it circulates for days. And with every new business that opens, stays a little longer. Month 3, BBC run a news segment. Is this town becoming a Black separatist community? Millions watch. And people don't like what they see. So some of those upset people put their money where their mouth is. They start making offers on the properties in the town, trying to buy their way in before it's too late. But the Black Brits had already seen that coming. Remember that application I told you about in month 1? Well, they registered the town as a community trust. Once complete, not one person owning it. The land belongs to the community permanently. No outsider can buy it or force to sell. But that process takes a few months and everybody's watching the clock. Month 4. Parliament takes notice. This is not a community. This is segregation.
Listen, because he started to speak about property so deeply. I've got to get into this. You know, this is super powerful, and there's 2 things that are coming to my mind so strongly right now, and I'm going to get back into the video, but the first thing that's coming to my mind so strongly about this is exactly what the Bible speaks about in the book of Acts. And the problem we have is most people who talk about the Bible don't actually read the Bible, but they've got views on the Bible. And if you study the Bible throughout the book of Acts, you see the definition of what we call today a commonwealth society, a true kingdom, which unfortunately we don't see any practical examples of in our current day and age, even though a whole bunch of places are called kingdoms. Now, the thing that's interesting about that is not only the model that's being described here is a biblical model. It is the book of Acts commonwealth model that's being shared, where people come together and see their wealth as common, their wealth in accountancy, their wealth in plumbing, their wealth in their trade and their skill, as well as everything else that's real. Not only is that a biblical model, but that biblical model then has to face the current global world climate. And the specific current global world climate that I'm actually speaking about in this regard is the fact that if you have a community trust and you say, you know what, this land is owned by our community trust, in 9 situations out of 10, the government would not be able to do anything. Unless what? Well, if we go and check out hashtag Black History, and this is probably not seen as Black History to most people, but it should be recognized as Black History. The KICC Church, okay? Kingsway International Christian Center, I believe is the name, of KICC, led by Pastor Matthew Ashimolowo, right? A beacon of example in our UK diaspora Afro-Caribbean community. Whether you like it or not, just hear me out for a second, because I know there's going to be the naysayers. Oh no, I'm not looking at no pastor as a beacon. Oh no, these Christians, like whatever, right? Hold your biases to the side for a moment. And we're going to come back to the video, but hold your biases to the side for a moment, because I want you to understand something. Pastor Matthew, okay, and I'm not a KICC member. I'm not saying this because of a bias of the fact that I'm a member of his church. Pastor Matthew, when I was growing up, was one of the leading pastors in the UK, all right, who did things a certain way. He built and he bought, okay? And there's a lot of pastors out there that I can hold the torch up to and say, you know what, these guys are leaders, movers, shakers, but not all of them built and bought. And not all of them bought in a way that they could hold on to what they had until today. But what happened with KICC? Because this is very important. KICC owned their building. Their building was in the Stratford/Hackney, more Hackney at the time, Waterden Road, I believe was the location of that building. And in 2012, it was prior to 2012, but in 2012, in London, we had the Olympics, the London Olympics. And as a result of the London Olympics coming up a little bit prior to 2012, the government went out of their way to do a few things. One, what I might call a smear campaign. I don't know. I haven't gone into the research, but those of you who are watching this, if you're a KICC member, or you know anything about what I'm talking about, let me know in the comments below if that is true. But I perceive at the time, I was a lot younger, there was a so-called smear campaign that looked like it came out saying that Pastor Matthew and his church was involved in fraud. Okay. Now that was never really resolved in terms of the public eye from what I saw, because the same media outlets that were saying, hey, this is happening, were not the same media outlets to later say how it resolved, which usually happens in certain communities when they don't want to say, oh, we were messing around with the community, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, the government did something which people have very rarely become accustomed with. And in the UK, there's a concept called compulsory purchase, or making a compulsory purchase order. A compulsory purchase order, right? A CPO is when the government, by virtue of the Queen at the time, okay, by virtue of the Crown, are able to request a purchase compulsorily, regardless of whether the seller desires to sell. And to the best of my knowledge, if I'm wrong, if someone's got deeper research on this, let me know. To the best of my knowledge, a compulsory purchase order was issued on KICC Church, which resulted in their church having to be sold. Now, I want you to understand, right? To the best of my knowledge, the structure and entity framework that would have been used for KICC would have been a charity style commission. It wouldn't have been a business, a personal business. Why? Because it would have been a church. All right. So this is very important. I'm all for these kind of movements. This is why we're going to get back into the video. I'm all for these kind of movements, but I want us to understand how these movements work. And if we put the right things in place, this is what we should do first. We should first go and look at real history. Okay. Even history that happened in the last 20 or so years, right? Last 14 years in the example I'm giving, and look at what happens to these frameworks. Why? Not so we can run with a tail between our legs that God didn't give us. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying let's be afraid, let's be very afraid. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the reason we want to do that is so we can be adequately prepared to understand what are the specific shortcuts and cutoffs that could still potentially be placed in. Let's go back into the video. Let me see the rest of this.
British soil. These are British citizens. They've done nothing wrong. They've bought properties, started businesses, and registered to vote. Why are we here? The local MP writes to the Housing Secretary demanding that the land transfer gets reviewed and blocked. And the community watches every second of it and takes note. Meanwhile, black-owned GPs, pharmacies, and dentists open. Services built by the community for the community. Month 5. While Parliament is still talking, crime is falling and unemployment is dropping. Parents move quietly. They put their names forward for the school governing body. They just show up and they vote each other in. Outside the school gates, every business now has an apprentice. Those plumbers train the next plumbers. The accountants training the next accountant. The future is being built from the inside. The town they didn't even think should exist is thriving. Month 6. 6 months in and the land transfer completes. The review from the Housing Secretary found nothing because everything they done was legal. The community assembles and one person stands up and says something. We own the land, we own the businesses, we own the healthcare, we own the education, but we don't run this town. And they're right. And the MPs had forced their hand. Owning land, owning businesses aren't enough because every major decision affecting the future was still being made elsewhere. So they turned their attention to one last thing they hadn't taken yet: political power. So drop power in the comments if you want to see part 2. And until then, follow if you're done watching passively. We decode the myth and we don't clap for crumbs.
Let's go. You know, even just watching this video, I believe I have seen this before, because as it was playing, I was like, I've seen this before. I'm sure my wife sent it to me some time ago. But this video is super fire. I think every single person who's serious, who's a reader of books like Claude Anderson's Powernomics, should go and watch this video and think through, just like I've kind of done in this video, but think through how and where potentially are loopholes so we can produce solutions. Because the reality is, the more solutions we have, the more solutions we can implement. And just watching through this video today, like, I'm saying to myself, this is absolutely powerful. This is the kind of power that can be placed in people's hands. And no, it's not separatism, I believe is the term. And no, it's not segregation. It's actually just taking action. It's actually saying, you know what, this is what I desire, so this is what I'm going to work on until this desire moves up higher, right? So we get the opportunity to make that decision. But the question is, are we going to make that decision? Great big shout out to the creator. Shout out in the comments or in the description. Go look in the description of this video to see a link towards the creator, so you can go check out the video. I'm so pumped about this that I'm most likely going to have to do a video on part 2 if there is a part 2. I hope there's a part 2 because I'd love to look at that as well. But if you look at what was basically shared in the video, super beautiful and super simple, in 4 or 5 months, with a mobilization, with acknowledgement of the value and information, there's ultimately a high level of transformation. Having your own town, what would that allow you to do? What would that allow to come through? A few things I want to say. I want to cut it off here. I don't want the video to be too long, but I got to share this, right? Imagine what this would do for the next generation. Imagine what this would do for the children. Imagine if our children could look at us and know that we're united. What would that do for their future? Would they be on the streets? Would they be doing a whole bunch of stuff that some of our children are doing? I don't know what your answer is. Let me know in the comments below. I think I know what my answer is. But with that being said, remember, small keys open big doors. I'm looking forward to a future that's way more successful and way more prosperous for you and yours. With that being said, Sammy ICanWin signing out. Good day. God bless. Let's go.
Small keys open big doors.